Well, up to our first conversation for the day, the Nigeria Startup Bill project is a joint initiative by tech startup ecosystem and the presidency to harness the potential of the digital economy through co-created regulations. The bill is to ensure that laws and regulations are friendly, clear, planned, and work for the tech ecosystem. To bring us up to date on the bill and expectations is the President, Institute of Software Practitioners of Nigeria, Chineye Mbauzoko, joining us from our Abuja studio. Good morning, Chineye. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning to you, and thank you for having me.
Great. So the presidency has promised that there will be a startup bill before, to get to the conclusion of the process before the end of this year. And this work is in tandem with the private sector, which you represent. Bring us up to date on where the bill is now and what other processes we expect to see to bring it to, to its conclusion.
Well, again, we're at the cusp of something that is really important, something that probably is going to be a signature and also a roadmap for subsequent engagements between the executive arm of government and the private sector in terms of how we go about creating an environment that supports entrepreneurship development, and would also spill over into other sectors. Where we are currently is that we've co-created the bill. We've socialized it through every geopolitical zone. The last, which is the Southeast, comes up on the 23rd of this month in Enugu. We've taken it through all the industry groups. We've taken it directly into stakeholders. The entire stakeholder community has come together, and we've developed a bill. The bill itself has, in its final form, has been approved by the, has passed through the desk of the Honorable Minister for Digital Communications, communications and digital economy, and it's now currently at the Ministry of Justice for final vetting before it's sent into the presidency. So we're very optimistic that this is going to happen, and it's really incredible to see how the collaboration has happened. The big tent was developed, where everyone came together and we all participated in creating this bill. So it's extremely interesting. I mean, ISPON, the Institute of Software Practitioners of Nigeria, has been in the process of legislative reform, policy, and advocacy for over 2 decades. And I can tell you that this is one of the fastest and the most comprehensive collaborations that we've seen happen in terms of policy and fresh legislation that supports an enabling business environment. So we're very happy, very optimistic. Yeah.
So while that is impressive, I guess there's another conversation going around the implementation. We do hope that it's not just about passing it, because it's been said that we have a lot of good policies, a lot of paperwork. But when it comes to the implementation, are you satisfied with the structure that is there to enforce the implementation of this bill?
So we don't think of it from the perspective of enforcement. You know, when you're involved in a collaboration, when you co-create something, then there's joint ownership, collective ownership of the bill and the consequences of the bill. And so we expect that everyone is going to come to the table and work together to make it happen. It's not going to be easy, because this is not a bill that addresses a single sector, nor does it sit in any one ministry or department or agency of government. It requires a lot of cross-sectoral collaboration. And so the process that we've taken was actually designed to accommodate that reality, that there isn't any one person. I mean, when you think about it, we're going to have to work with organizations like the Central Bank of Nigeria. We're going to have to work with Investment Promotion Council, the Export Promotion Council, Ministry of Trade and Industries, Ministry of Youth and Sports. I mean, there's so many of these parts of government that we need to touch. And at the same time, we need to also scale from the lowest and the smallest of businesses all the way to the largest of corporations. It's a very ambitious goal. And that's why I said that what we're doing is going to probably create a template for the rest of for government going forward, because everyone is involved, everybody has a stake, and we're going to try and make it work together. So I'm pretty confident that the process, it will be onerous, it will be a learning process, but it is one that has started in a collaborative manner, and together we can we're going to probably deliver, we're going to be able to deliver the outcomes. So it's looking very good.
But who's driving the bill? Who is going to drive the implementation?
Well, that's the magic. We're all involved. Everyone is involved. So the bill provides for the establishment of a council And that council is really just for the purpose of registering the startups and creating kind of like a pool within which everyone can actually, like building a community or a house in which everyone can then belong. And once you're resident within this building, you get all the benefits of a tenant within that building. And the benefits are, so that council would also work to the interministerial collaboration and the multi-stakeholder framework that is required to make it work. So it's when you say responsible, I think we're collectively responsible for making it work. This is not something that ends up in one ministry or one department of government, and then it has to now struggle to get the kind of collaboration and cooperation that it requires. And I'll give you one example. You know, the AFCFTA, for example, is a massive opportunity for Nigerian companies, particularly startups, to scale their businesses from Nigeria into other markets. For that to happen, you definitely need to have this cross-sector collaboration. So the council then becomes almost like a clearinghouse, a place where discussions can be held, where issues can be put forward, where challenges can actually be resolved, and where direction can be given to the impetus and the momentum that we're hoping to gain out of the bill. So I think it's really like I said, we're co-creating this. This is not something that any one person has put together. And because of that collaboration in that big tent, we are already building the relationships, building the quality of the understanding that is required to make this work. And we're even going beyond the federal government to the subnationals. As I said earlier, town halls have been held in every geopolitical zone. And attendance has been from the legislatures representing those zones, to the governments that's of the subnationals, to the stakeholder community around the chambers of commerce, to the startups ecosystems that are bodying in all these parts of the country. And it's just like we're lifting this carpet all together at the same time from all the edges. And I think it's going to be really phenomenal for us to make this work and to learn from it and to do this with other areas where we need that level of collaboration and co-creation. So it's really exciting. This is not a sector bill that is homogeneous, and it's not something that has single ownership. It's collective ownership and it's collaboration, and this is the way that the 21st century itself, the economies of the 21st century work, through collaboration. So we have to learn it. Whatever we don't know, we will learn on our way. And I think it's great that we've gotten this far, this fast.
All right, so like you even mentioned, the bill is supposed to, get all startups, at least major ones, startups registered, so I'm thinking, how inclusive would this be? What will be the requirement for this registration? Because at this point, if the requirement gets really stiff, then you could lose, the very little startups down there. So how do you make this flexible so that it is inclusive?
Oh, it's very inclusive, and the barriers are really low. We've tried our best to create. Well, we're working within existing legislation and not necessarily creating new things. So the central idea is going to always be about how do you not change what you don't have to change, but how do you make the pieces work together? So when you look at Nigeria, as is typical of other countries, there are approximately 41 to 43 million micro and small businesses in Nigeria. And these micro and small businesses actually have about 70% of the working population involved in them. But when you decompose that 41 million to what we would call small enterprises, these are organizations that have 10 staff, a minimum of 10 staff, and have a turnover in excess of 5 million naira, the number drops to 100,000. There's no way that you can actually generate the kind of momentum you want in an economy unless we find a way to onboard so many more and facilitate the emergence of many more. In a country like the United States, they have approximately 500,000 new businesses are registered every month. Last year, I think the figure was about 4.35 million businesses applications were made to register businesses. And these countries have almost 90% of the population engaged in this small and in this same sector. So when you think about the startup bill, it will be wrong, literally, to actually create barriers to the establishment of this. The real essence of the NSP is to open up the space, facilitate the emergence of these organizations, create a stronger likelihood of their succeeding, and help them through the processes and across the challenges that they face. Sometimes even just within government, getting registrations done, getting cooperation, and access to the incentives that sit within the government framework is almost impossible for a small business. And so if we want to accelerate the pace, and we have to, particularly in the startup ecosystem where what we call serendipity is what drives things. In other words, you have to have a large number of organizations and ideas meeting each other, colliding, creating new opportunities and new businesses, and changing and pivoting as they go along. For that to happen, we have to remove the barriers, and we must facilitate the level of interaction and the ease of that interaction within that sector. So the barriers are the same as what you've had before. The incentives are more. We're looking at things like startup free trade zones. We're looking at things like a credit guarantee scheme. We're looking at issues like access to funding through a startup fund. There are various things that are within that system. And you will agree with me that once you create this level of incentives, once you create this level of momentum, you really must have some kind of a shape, as I called it, a house within which, or if you like, I prefer the metaphor of a garden. You know, you've got to have a garden that you can actually manage. You can't throw the seeds of entrepreneurship out into the wild and hope that they grow. So we really are trying to create this huge national garden within which the right kind of care is given to nurture these organizations, to enable them start up and hopefully succeed over time.
And what's the conversation around licenses, pre-tax levies, and you know, around that? How friendly is that? Because I mean, even when you talk to entrepreneurs now, manufacturers, the issue of tax, multiple taxation, you know, comes up. So what's the conversation making that friendly also for startups?
Right. So again, let's look at those numbers. So 43 million voices, individual voices, talking to government or talking to an agency of government or talking to a stakeholder within the market. 43 million voices. You'll agree with me, it will become a cacophony, and literally nothing will get done. It's important to find a way to get people together into a space where we can speak with a single voice around the things that we want to do. And this is really one of the most important dynamics of advocacy. Oftentimes, when businesses are sitting somewhere complaining, they're standing alone and confronting institutions like the Federal Inland Revenue Service. The only way in which to get the FIRS to the table and to have constructive discussions with them is when you've got this group that has come together and is having this conversation directly with FIRS, for example, or you want to get a special fund started by the Central Bank or by the Development Bank of Nigeria. You can't have 43 million or even 100,000 voices speaking into that space. You've got to find some way to cohere them. And even though there's a strong focus and people are rightly apprehensive around licensing and licensing regimes and taxation regimes, this is going to be an ongoing negotiation. We all know everywhere in the world that taxation is a fundamental pillar of government. You cannot run away from it. But what you want to do is to bring some coherence to it and to ensure that it doesn't become a disincentive to evolving a healthy business environment. And for that to happen, again, like I said, you have to have some kind of a system within which you actually resolve those issues, with which you make your case, and you begin to kind of like educate the people who need to be educated. Many people talk about startups, particularly in the tech ecosystem, without really understanding what's involved. They don't really understand the pains of a business, and we've seen it in certain ways. And a clear example, for instance, would be the misconception of the security forces, as we have seen in some places, where just carrying a laptop and a backpack is enough for you to be stopped and to be asked who you are and what you are. If I'm an individual walking along the street, I could be anyone carrying those things. But once you find yourself within the enclosure of this garden, this virtual garden, you have identity, you have a presence, you have a system that steps up for you and supports you as an individual or as a business. And that's why it's important that we have gotten to this stage, and why this virtual garden, we should all be involved in nurturing it. We're all gardeners in this space. And everybody needs to come in and maybe clear the weeds where you find the weeds, put in the fertilizer where you need to have the fertilizer, make sure we get enough water into the system, and basically even create a market where you can actually take your goods when they're produced. And that requires help. A startup is an extremely vulnerable business. It is small. It doesn't have the capacity to engage in all the administrative and bureaucratic processes that are necessary to create a business environment. And so you need to find some way to support them. And that's really what we're after now. And that's what this is all about.
And a report recently showed that 87% of the fintech startups are being funded by foreigners. Is there a need to start with to change this narrative, that is to get more funding from the local space? Or are we safe? Are we good with this? Are we safe with this?
I would say that the first thing I would say is that is like, thumbs up, fantastic. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that we were in contention for the startup capital of Africa, for example. And today it's indisputable that this is now Nigeria. How did we get there? For us to get there, we needed to have support from certain stakeholders. And the first people to come to the table was foreign capital. And foreign capital has been in this business, particularly around the technology-enabled businesses, for decades. When you think back to the service economy, what we now call the information economy, started as far back as 1983. And from that time till now, these people have developed certain competencies, certain skill sets, a certain knowledge, market knowledge, and a certain market access and leverage that allows them to be first in this manner. Yes, it would have been perfect. We've been singing this song through ISPON for the past 20 years, supporting local content, finding local capital, and all that. If it requires for foreign capital to come in to show us the way, all well and good. Happy to learn. And the next thing is where do we go from here? And now you're starting to see that the HNIs in Nigeria, the high net worth individuals and corporations and local venture capital and private equity firms are beginning to inject funding into the market. And this has been happening, but certainly not at the scale. I mean, the one that makes the biggest news is probably the ones that you hear that are dollar denominated. But I know that there are a number of venture capital companies and private equity companies operating in Nigeria that have been consistently injecting funding into the startup ecosystem, not talked about, maybe not so well known. And increasingly now, we're also starting to see that our entrepreneurs are learning and our venture capitalists are learning. So now you're seeing the second wave happening, where early stage investors in the early stages of the emergence of this startup ecosystem, have now themselves, early stage entrepreneurs and founders have now themselves become investors in secondary companies. So now you're seeing individuals in a portfolio, building a portfolio. They've taken the experience that they had as startups, and they've taken that and now started building other businesses. So you're seeing the second wave of that growth, and that's the maturity that we want to see in the system. I'm pretty sure that this situation will change. I can bet you 10 years from now, it won't be the same story, particularly if we get the startup bill done.
Done this year. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Chinenye Mbaozoku, the President, Institute of Software Practitioners of Nigeria, for sharing your thoughts with us and bringing us up to date on the startup bill. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
So we'll take a break now. After the break, we'll talk about women empowerment and the impact on the economy. You'll stay with us. It's Business Morning on Channel Television.